This is Bookmarks with Richard Gadds.
Hello again, Richard Gadds here. Today I'm at the Grand Hotel in Bristol. I'm at CrimeFest, the International Crime Fiction Convention. And with me now is Katherine Black. So, Katherine,
Yes.
tell us all about your books.
All right. Well, I've got two books. I write the Most Unusual Mysteries series. They're cozy crime, but they push the boundaries of cozy crime. So I've got a lot of diverse characters, some saucy language, some spicy scenes. So they're cozy crime, but not as you know it.
Right, Cozy Crime Plus.
Yes.
Right. Who's your detective? Do you have a regular one?
Yes, so May Morrigan is my sort of protagonist. She is a retired librarian, and she now owns a bookshop in Blackheath in southeast London, which is where I live. And she seems very, very traditional on the outside, but May has secrets. And she's adjusting to life without her husband of 40 years. And her best friend Fletcher comes to live with her. They were university friends. And Fletcher is a retired art history professor. So they're sort of reliving their youth, and they had a really, really good youth in the 1960s, so they're a lot of fun. And then some people start dying in the village, and May and Fletcher decide to investigate.
Right. So is it one of those villages that, seems to be awash with dead bodies, midsummer and places
Well,
like that?
it's fascinating. So it's Blackheath, which is London, southeast London,
Right.
but it is a village. So and I live in Blackheath, and we have the butcher and the fishmonger, and you do have that closed cast of people. And it's been really fascinating writing it. So in the first book, this is not a spoiler, but the butcher dies, and really. On social media, I noticed that the Blackheath butcher had started following me, which I thought was really funny.
He's probably terrified.
Well, so then he sent me a photograph of my book on his butcher block with a bloody cleaver. So I think he found it funny.
That's one way to get business, isn't it?
It was either very threatening or very funny.
Yes, it could be misinterpreted, that.
So they seem to be on board. So it's really nice. It is a lovely
That's all right.
community. I love Blackheath.
Right, so you just got to be careful who you kill
Yeah.
in the community. What brought you to writing in the first place?
Well, I always loved reading, and I always read crime fiction. I always loved crime fiction. Like I always credit Scooby-Doo. That was my first crime fiction. Great gothic narratives.
Yeah.
And then Nancy Drew, and then on to Agatha Christie, and so I've always loved it. And then I was a stay-at-home mum for 20 years, and thought, okay, these kids are growing up. I need to find something else.
Yeah.
And this was the dream. So I thought, I'll give it a shot. If it doesn't work out, I'll do something else. And thankfully, it's worked out so far. So.
Yeah. Excellent. So, cozy crime is your sort of your natural habitat, so to speak.
Yes. I like reading it. I do find it very comforting. I do read lots of other crime genres, but cozy is the one I come back to over and over again. So that's what I set out to write. But then my characters didn't seem to know that they were in a cozy crime novel. They kept doing things. And it was like, no, you can't do that, But I just had to cut them loose in the end, and
Oh, wow. Did you find that, because, it sounds like you're sort of blending genres a little bit there. Did you find any trouble finding a market for it?
I did actually, yes. So I had 20 submissions, 20 rejections, and I was just starting to rewrite it in a more traditional way when I got my yes from Bloodhound Books. And they actually are sponsoring part of the festival today. Yeah, you can see their logo on the bags and stuff.
Yeah.
Very exciting. It was really grateful. They published it as it was, with all the little quirky bits and everything. So,
right. Oh, that's good. Because quite often, as you say, a lot of these things will get edited out.
Exactly. Yes.
But no, that's really good. Do you have a whole series planned?
I do, yes, yes. So I'm working on the third one, and this is going to be a Christmas one, which is really fun because the books are very camp. I think of them as like Carry On crime fiction,
right?
So, I mean, Christmas, it just writes itself, you know. It's all based around a panto and all that kind of thing. So I'm working on that one now. And yeah, then I've got another book with Bloodhound on the current contract. And yeah, we'll see. Yeah.
Excellent. Because they're very popular, aren't they? Christmas
Yes.
crime
Yes.
things. You know, you see a lot of them.
It's the perfect time of year. Yeah. You know,
yeah.
it's dark, it's cold, curl up with a book.
Yeah. I remember Radio 4 used to do these things every year. They had their crime at Christmas
Oh, yes.
thing, but I don't think they do it much anymore. But you know, that was always a favourite when I was a teenager.
Oh, yeah.
It was that sort of
Just listening.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
That's nice.
Isn't it weird how Christmas lends itself to crime and
Yeah.
ghost stories?
I suppose we're all stressed, so it's like an outlet.
Can you tell us anything about your future plots? Or would you have to kill me?
Well, I like to try to take the traditional tropes and play with them. So the second book plays with the idea of a poison pen letter, which I love in Agatha Christie. She did that really well. But it's using text messages that are sort of airdropped into the bookshop every day. And they're revealing secrets of people in the village and stuff. And so I'd like to try to do a locked room mystery. That's what I'm thinking for this Christmas one. Yeah. And I haven't quite worked it all out yet, but that's what I'm aiming for.
Yeah. So I guess you're a planner.
Well, ish. Yeah. I do a kind of structure very loosely. Like I know what I'm aiming for, and then I set off, and then it becomes something else half the time. Yeah. But yes.
That's quite brave, writing crime fiction, because when I did it for children, and I always found the Agatha Christie method worked best, i.e. plot backwards.
Yes, yes.
So, and I found I couldn't deviate at all from my plan because everything would go awry.
Yes,
so,
it is a nightmare.
Yeah. Do you find you've got any freedom at all in your...
Loads, actually. So the second book, I sort of did that where I thought, I know who I want the killer to be. I know I had the sort of denouement in my head, like how it was going to finish. Yeah. And then as I was writing it, I thought, oh, that's really boring, actually. And then chose a different killer in the end, and like just moved it. Oh, that would be more interesting. But then, of course, I had to go back and then weave through, because I do want to be fair. Yeah. I do try to play fair with the reader. Yeah. And go and weave in, some clues and some red herrings, just to kind of make it make more sense.
I was it's half the fun is leaving the red herrings.
Yes, exactly. Well, it was perfect because I had, been pushing towards this one person who I then changed my mind, so that became the red herring.
Right. What are the titles of your first two?
The first one is called A Most Unusual Demise, and the second one is A Most Malicious Messenger.
Right. Yeah. Okay, I shall look out for them. So, for the time being, Katherine Black, thank you very much for talking to us today, and good luck with the Christmas book.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm now with Bryan J Mason, who's the author of Shaking Hands with the Devil, and I think you've got a new book coming out soon?
That's right, coming out at the end of May, An Old Tin Can, the first in a series based in Belfast during the Troubles.
Right, are these two both in the same vein?
They are, they're both, the first one I describe as a serial killer rom-com, but the rom is a bit wrong, and this one is, again, it's based in the Troubles, but it is a serial killer com. So there's the darkness and the light.
Yes. I was going to say there is a lot of darkness in there, and there is a lot of comedy. So how do you balance the two? That must be difficult.
It's difficult, and it's something that I'm aware of all the way through. I'm attracted to the noir aspect, the darkness, the meat of it. Yeah. But I think my own personality comes through, and I do like the comedy. I like to puncture the tension, but I do have some crazy characters, and I have so a lot of the comedy comes from the characters and the situations and the ridiculousness of it all as well. Yes. And I do intentionally try to make people laugh, but also, especially in An Old Tin Can, I think there are some very nasty things that happen based on true stories as well. It's difficult, and you don't want to upset people, but that's the vein that I'm in, really.
Do you find it, because that's an interesting setting, you know, Northern Ireland during the Troubles. Is there a particular reason that you've set your stories there?
Yeah, when I first went to Belfast, I went during the Troubles, and I saw it then. I was pretty shocked. And then I went again in the 2000s, and I think I was more shocked because I thought it was all over. You know, I'd heard the Good Friday Agreement, I'd seen all the things that finished, and then when you go there, you realise actually there's still so much that's carrying on. There's the iconography, there's the tribalism, there's the constant searching back into history to try and make amends for things that went wrong or the crimes that were committed. And it's a different place than it was, but it's still very much alive and kicking. And I found it, as the people also come out, there's a great gallows humour amongst people in Northern Ireland, and they are living mostly harmoniously with each other, but separately from each other. And I wanted, I was attracted to that. But the Troubles, I think, is an area where it's, because the first novel was based in 1989, 1990, and I actually wanted to do the second one in the same period. So, and Northern Ireland is a perfect place to set it.
Yeah. Does that colour the kind of characters that you put into the stories?
Yeah, very much. Yes. So my first my detective who arrives in Northern Ireland is actually English and Jewish. So he's a real outsider in Northern Ireland. That's sort of the title as an old tin can. Are you a Billy or a Dan or an old tin can? If you're a Billy, if you're a Protestant, a Dan, you're a Catholic, or an old tin can, you're nothing. And what do you do with an old tin can? You kick them down the road. Right. And the guys who are in the RUC at the time, who are the squad, they are quite eccentric characters, and they're sort of oddball characters, or they're the people who've been left behind, who are committed policemen, but they are battered on all sides by what's going on. So, and then I do take a lot of the mickey out of some of the terrorists themselves. So, and I treat them exactly the same, whichever side the divide they're on, and I do treat them with a bit of license, as well as real characters who I've brought in, named characters who I brought in.
Right. So I assume you've got to be very true to the period then. I mean, there's no leeway for... No.
Yeah. And that's the research has been fascinating and really enjoyable. Yeah. And I was talking to other historical crime writers yesterday, and the difference that I've got is that I can talk to people who were there, and also you can see it. You can see it on the screen, on TV. You can see old footage. You can see documentaries that are made now, but you can go back and see this footage. And there's increasingly a wealth of information about Northern Ireland, and things are coming out all the time about the collusion. And I've got a character based on Steak Knife. This is a character, Steak Knife, who was a mole placed by British intelligence in the IRA Army Council, called Freddie Scappaticci, you could say his name now because he's dead, and it's out there, and I've got a character a bit based on him. I call him Cucciano, which is Italian for teaspoon.
That's sort of the fun is in finding good names for these.
I do really enjoy finding names for characters. Yeah.
Is there one particular, because as you say, both stories are sort of separate but the same. Is there one particular strand you think you're going to carry on with?
Well, I'm doing it. The Old Tican. There is a series, so I'm writing a series, and so that's based in Northern Ireland. It's 3 months later, something happens, and then we pick up the story 3 months later, and that's called Dead On in the vernacular. So again, it's the one I'm writing now, Dead On. It is a bit darker, and I reread a bit the other day, thinking, I need to put a few more gags in here. Yeah. I need to change something, but it comes from the characters. It always comes from the humour, comes from the characters and the situations. So it's that black comedy. Black comedy is what I do. Black comedy is. And I think you can still say that the term black comedy. It's called noir comedy sometimes, but it's that gallows humour type aspect that I love.
Yes, well, as I say, it's a very difficult, tightrope to walk.
Yes, yes. And I've been an actor, and I know what it's like to die on stage. Yeah, when you think you've got something funny to say, and you don't quite say it right, and you die on your feet. But then you know that it's your fault. That's why you've done it, because you haven't quite, the phrasing's not right, or the beat's not right, or you've not quite played it right to the audience. So it's those sort of things that you try to get right in writing. I mean, you can't please everybody all the time.
Well,
it's impossible.
No, quite. I mean, are there any other writers in that genre that you particularly like?
It's strange, because I do like comic writers, and I like people who've got dialogue. I think my favourite book was probably A Confederacy of Dunces by J. and that's a little bit more knockabout than mine, but that's the book I loved when I read it, and I've read it 5 or 6 times. And crime writers, I just love writers who've got the dialogue. I still think that Elmore Leonard is fantastic. He doesn't necessarily use comedy that much, but his characters produce a bit of they're a little bit crazy, and the Philip Marlowe stories are just wonderful, because it's the wisecracking that Chandler puts in.
It's just the phraseology of those stories.
And they're all American, but mine isn't. Mine's British, and there are lots of crime writers I love. And I'd say Ian Rankin, Rebus. There's bits of comedy in there. Not so much, but there are comic aspects.
Yeah. Well, Bryan J Mason, thank you very much for talking to us today. And
thank you for meeting me
with the new book.
Thank you, Richard.
With me now is Sam Holland, whose latest book is The Puppet Master.
So The Puppet Master follows a DCI called Cara Elliott. So she's been in a couple of books before, but it can be read as a standalone. So it follows her as she's called out to a railway station where a man has unfortunately fallen on the tracks. So it starts out as a bit of sort of curiosity for her, she's a murder detective. But it quickly evolves into something else. As the team look into it, they discover there's a series of suicides. All the victims are unconnected. They didn't know each other. But there's just too many for it to be coincidence, and they realise that somebody's actually manipulating these people and driving them to their deaths. So it's very creepy, sort of psychological twist to it, but I think it's lots of fun.
What makes you want to write at that end of the crime market rather than, say, the cosy?
It's just what I'm interested in. So I'm fascinated by sort of the forensic aspects of crime. So I always have like a pathologist. I always have like lots of crime scene investigations, and I have a sort of interest in the psychological aspects of sort of serial killers and why they do what they do. And to be honest, I grew up on a diet of sort of Stephen King and Dean Koontz and James Herbert. So the grisly aspects of crime is something that I just really enjoy writing.
So I expect the research is fun.
Yes, very, very much fun. I really enjoy the research. I go down lots of rabbit holes. For example, for the book I'm currently writing, I'm looking into how you get bodies out of concrete. So how do you find them, and then how do you get the bodies out, and then how can you... So it's fascinating.
How do you get bodies out of concrete?
I don't know. I haven't found it out yet. Very carefully, I think.
Yes.
Very carefully. And ground-penetrating radar seems to be how you find them.
Right.
But one of the questions I need to ask, I've got a police dog handler who's a contact, is can the dog smell the body? Anyway, it's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what were your previous titles? Were they in the same genre?
Yeah, so as Sam Holland, I've written The Echo Man and The 20, and they're sort of in the same series, same sort of... so The Echo Man is about a serial killer copying known serial killers from the past, so like Manson, Dahmer. So it sort of touches on all those true crime cases, and it's a lot of fun. And then I also write under another name called Louisa Scarr, and under that name I've got a new series coming out, which is about a police dog handler trying to find her missing husband. So that comes out in July. That's called Gallows Wood.
Right. What are some of your your influences, as it were? Have you always been a crime fan?
Yeah, I think so. And I read a range of things. I read a lot of crime. I read a lot of romance, interestingly, as well. But yeah, so I, as I said, I grew up with sort of Stephen King and James Herbert and that very much sort of dark, Patricia Cornwell, those sort of very dark crime books. So yeah, when I sort of started writing, that was the sort of direction I took, really.
Yeah. Have you got a favourite?
I think my favourite, if I was going to name a Stephen King, it would be, I can't remember what book it's from, but it's a novella called The Long Walk.
Oh, yeah.
It's, honestly, it just absolutely grabbed my attention. I was probably much too young to read it, but yeah, absolutely just grabbed me.
Yes,
Yeah,
I remember. I haven't read it for years and years
No.
and years, but it's one of those things that stays with you,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah. I can still remember like how it ends, how it progresses. It's fantastic.
You say you're researching for the next book. Can we know anything about it yet?
So for anyone that has sort of read all my other books, it is a sort of it casts off the end of an ongoing thread that has been going on since the beginning. So it's sort of the ending of that thread, but there is obviously a case in itself. So it's about, it begins as a woman drops off a tape in the reception of the police station, and they watch it, and it's a snuff film, so it's somebody being killed. And they track this woman down, obviously very quickly, because if you drive into a police station, they can find you pretty quickly. And it's sort of like the investigation into where this film come from, who was the victim, and there's sort of an industry behind it. So yes, it is lots of fun to write. I am lucky that I have a lot of people who help me. So I have a friend that's a cop, and he's, from the beginning of my career, he's always been very helpful, telling me how things work, how to investigate a murder. A lot of it's online. You'd be surprised how many procedures, like the entire murder investigation procedure is for Hampshire Police is online. So you just Google and find it. I have my step-brother-in-law is a doctor, so he checks all the medical stuff. I have my two sister-in-laws, one's a pharmacist and one's a paramedic. So they help me. They put me in contact with a CSI. So you just sort of gradually pick up this network of contacts, of people that can help you. But I get far too in. But it is very important to me to sort of cover off those aspects.
Well, anyway, Sam Holland, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us today.
Thank you.
With me now is Sarah Ward, the author of The Sixth Lie. Thanks for joining us, Sarah. Tell us all about the book.
Okay, so the book is set in St David's. Mm-hmm. It's the second in my Welsh-based series, featuring my detective, who's Mallory Dawson, who's actually a civilian investigator. Right. So she is former Met Police, but she was injured in the line of duty, and she, in the first book, The Birthday Girl, she goes to a Welsh island as a hotel manager, sort of the night manager, and helps solve a crime there, and she then is sort of brought into the police for various investigations. That's how the series is developing. Right. And in book 2, she's in St David's, so my first book was a fictional island, whereas St David's is obviously a real place, and it's all set around St David's, the cathedral, and also there's a sort of very famous cliff shrine called St Non's, which is supposedly the birthplace of St David's mother, and that's where the crime happens. Oh. Yeah.
Is that important to you to get a lot of real life places and atmosphere?
Yes, in fact my panel yesterday at CrimeFest was on setting, and I do like to have real settings. So mine's set in basically Pembrokeshire, Ceredigion, sort of West Wales, but then I do either fictionalise the place, or even if I have a real place like St David's, I do add streets and things, because I don't want the setting to dictate the plot. The plot needs to work into the setting, really.
Where do your characters spring from?
So with Mallory, I really my first 4 books were police procedurals, and I didn't want to write another police procedural. I didn't want to do all the research for the police procedure that I thought might have changed in the sort of 5 years since I'd previously written
I'm
one.
amazed how regularly it does change.
Yeah, exactly, because my previous 2 books after the police procedurals were gothic, historical. Yeah. So I wanted, but then I still love reading police books. So I wanted someone who kind of knew the policing, but is nevertheless an outsider investigating the crime. So Mallory, in fact, was the first thing that came together. The character led both the plot and the setting, actually. And it was this idea that she has been a police officer, and sometimes I know they find it hard to let go, really. So then it's a case of, trying to find, how she could get into an investigation, because, having an amateur sleuth, I mean, she's not an amateur, but she's not official. She's officially seconded onto investigations, but it's like, how are you going to get her into murder scenes, basically? And one of my students, I teach crime fiction, was that a former police officer who was invited back into the force as a civilian investigator. And basically they get involved in murder investigations and everything. The only thing, they actually, some of them sort of lead them up. But what they can't do is arrest. They've got no powers of arrest. That comes with your warrant card and everything. So other than that, though, they do everything. They interview, they visit crime scenes, they do all the investigation and so on. So and it's cheaper for the police than sort of, to get someone in seconded for like 6 months rather than, training someone up.
God, I'm well behind the curve there.
Yeah, I'd never heard of it, but it's a really good device for me, because so I can get the sort of policing in, but she's also a bit of a maverick, in terms of she can do other things that maybe if she was officially police she couldn't do.
Right. So what's the crime fiction scene like in Wales?
Well, it's very, very vibrant. It's still a bit behind, I would say, like Scottish crime fiction, so on, as in it's not as well known. Quite a lot of us are really sort of flying the flag for Welsh crime fiction to show that it doesn't have to we're not all writing books based in Wales, and we're not all living in Wales. So I do live in Wales. I live in Ceredigion on one of my series here. I've got a new series set in New England coming out in October. But some of us live abroad, so the chair of Gwyl Crime Cymru, the festival, lives in Venice. Oh. So very exotic, and his books are set also in Venice, but has a sort of Welsh protagonist. And then there's people who, and Cathy Ace is a member. She's from Swansea, but lives in Canada. So it's sort of this idea of having a Welshness. I think the term is a real and present connection to Wales. But it's not just Welsh writers writing in Welsh or with Welsh settings. It's very diverse as we can make it, really.
Yeah. I'm fascinated that you mentioned your Gothic historicals.
Yes.
Because that's very much my genre.
Oh, is it?
So
Brilliant.
Tell me a bit about those.
Well, I sort of grew up reading a lot of crime fiction, so I love crime. But I also grew up reading a lot of ghost stories, and I really, really wanted to write something with an element of supernatural. And I didn't fancy writing it in contemporary, although I could do, because, I do think it's quite interesting what happens in the present day. But I think there's periods in time where elements of spiritualism and supernatural have been very predominant because of the prevailing times, really. So my first book, The Quickening, it was Rhiannon Ward, I used my middle name, was set in the aftermath of the First World War and the Spanish flu epidemic, where there'd been lots of people who had died in both instances, and that especially for the First World War, there was no body and so on, so people sometimes struggle to accept that people had died, and then that's when they visited spiritualism. So spiritualism was very popular late Victorian period, had a bit of a dip, and there was a revival in the 1920s. So that was my first book, The Quickening, and then my second one was called The Shadowing, which is less supernatural but still gothic, and that's set in a workhouse near where I was living before, in the Peak District, called Southall. It's Southall Workhouse in Nottinghamshire. So yeah,
it's interesting, the spiritualism thing, isn't it? Because Arthur Conan Doyle was very pushed into that, and it damaged his career, didn't it?
It did. So Arthur Conan Doyle's a character in The Quickening, actually. So that was quite interesting to write, because there's lots of YouTube videos of hearing him speak.
Yes.
So you do get sort of the cadence of his of how he's talked. But what happened with Conan Doyle was he started off with a critical eye, which was good. So at the beginning of his career, he would unmask the fake mediums. But as he got older, he became more reactionary, in as much that he believed lots and lots of things. And Houdini helped unmask, the fact that his wife used to do automatic writing, and that was a fraud, and he totally believed in the fairies.
Yes, the cotton leaf fairies.
I know.
Yes. But he wrote a whole book about it.
Yeah,
it's fascinating to me that Conan Doyle, of all people, he'd be laughed at by his own creation, Sherlock Holmes.
Of course, that is the.
It's so strange.
Yeah, the dichotomy, really, the sort of tension in Conan Doyle. But I quite like the fact he is a complex person, and I think the fact that he lost either a son or a stepson in the First World War.
I think it was his son. I think that's what pushed him more into spiritualism.
And that says a lot about spiritualism, that there's often a lot of people grieving, which allows people to be fraudulent. And my medium is she fraudulent? She's partly fraudulent. She uses the tricks of the trade, but she also believes she has a gift as well, which is very common, I think, in spiritualism. My husband's a spiritualist, so and where he's always on the lookout for the fake, the obviously fake, using all the tricks. So it was really interesting to write about, and I try to leave things open as much as I can. So if you believe in spiritualism, then Ada, who's my medium, could be a medium, and if you don't, there's quite a lot of things you can clearly poo-poo.
That's very one of my favourites is Affinity.
Oh yes,
Sarah Waters.
Yes, that's a very good book. Yeah.
Which is so wonderfully ambiguous.
Yes, yes, and I think that is, as I mentioned, that is true to life. I think some mediums do have a gift, but they rely on other tricks to put on a show, basically. Yeah.
So to return to the world of crime, where would you put your books on the scale between cosy at one end and psychological at the other?
Well, my books have been described as medium boiled.
Medium boiled,
so not hard boiled.
Right.
Yeah, medium boiled. Yeah, so they're definitely not cosy, and certainly because I don't think crime's cosy. I enjoy reading cosy crime, but I don't feel like writing it because I think the crimes that I depict can be quite dark. But my Welsh series in particular, although the crimes are dark, I would say they are medium boiled. They're not graphic.
Yeah.
The new series that I'm starting in October called Death Rights, starting with the first book, Death Rights, is darker because it's got an element of the Gothic in there. It's about ritual house protection, so it's the signs that people carve into the walls, like the daisy wheels and the hexafoils.
Yeah.
And that is by its nature dark, even though in Wales we have a lot of ritual house protections. The witches' bottles that are found in the fireplaces and in the corner. Yeah. They're often found in Christian households as well, because it doesn't have to be one or other. Right. And that's what I'm always interested in fiction. It's not you either, you consort with the devil or you go to chapel every day. Yeah. In Wales in particular, there's often, and I think it's true of a lot of country places, that they coexist side by side. And it's set in New England for various reasons, but I think New England brought some of those practices with them. You had the early settlers and who were often dissenters and persecuted, so very religious. But also they took with them the things like hanging, herbs by the front door and putting marks by the fireplace to prevent evil spirits. The two weren't opposed to each other; they coexisted side by side, and that's where I'm always interested in, where there's a sort of tension between two sort of different states of belief, really. Yeah. So my Welsh series, I've got book 3 coming out in July. It's called The Vanishing Act, and it's very much a Mary Celeste type scenario where somebody goes to a house and the family has literally just left. It looks like there's still a kettle boiling on the Arga and so on, and that's set in Carmarthenshire in the Breckford Forest, which is where my family are from. So it's the historic Glencothy Forest, so it was the place where the princes used to go and hide for when the English were coming in to invade them. So it's got a really strong historical presence. And then Death Rights, which is my New England series, is out in October. And my main character is an archaeologist. So I've been working with an archaeologist, Sarah Tarlow, who's been helping me with all the archaeology bit, because she's an academic and she goes to a New England college. And this is where all the ritual house protection all comes in. Yeah.
Well, Sarah Ward, thank you so much for speaking to us today. It's been really interesting.
Thank you.
And best of luck with the new book.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Yes, they are. Yes. That's right. They really are.
My next CrimeFest victim is A. Hunter, author of Every Step You Take. Thank you for talking to us today. Tell us all about the book.
So, it's a psychological thriller set during the London Marathon. So our main character is an elite runner who learns that her stalker, the person who's been terrorising her for the last 6 months, is at the event, and she has 26 miles to figure out who he is and what he wants.
Wow. I must say, I've never quite heard of a setting like that before. What made you think of that one?
So, I was looking for an original idea. I had put a post out on social media asking other writers to share with me what their work in progress was about, but rather than describing it in 3 emojis. And one of the other authors I follow, who's a romance novelist, had put up, I think, 3 emojis that was one looked like an athlete, also a knife, and also a kind of a confused face. Knowing that she didn't write crime fiction, I jokingly replied, this elite runner discovers her stalkers at the marathon and she's got to try and find out who he is. And my agent saw the tweet and said, "You must write this book." And so then it was a case of, well, how would I kind of do that? And I wanted to have this thing where one chapter of the book represents 1 mile of the marathon, so you kind of follow it in real time, told over about 3 hours.
Is this part of a series?
No, totally standalone. I have written series before, but I'm writing standalone books at the moment.
Okay, what are you working on at the moment?
So my next book is out on the 12th of July. It's called Sleepwalker. It's about a former soldier who is accused of murdering his wife, and he's sent to a revolutionary new sleep clinic, fictionalised on Lundy Island, where he's tested to see whether he might have killed her while sleepwalking.
You've got some original twists there, I must say.
I'm going for it, yeah. And that's kind of based on there's this rule of law in the UK that says you can't be convicted of any crime if it's committed while sleepwalking. But then the burden is on proving that you were sleepwalking when the crime was commissioned.
What's your writing routine? Do you have one?
Very much so. I'm a very fast writer. I have a day job that I have to balance my writing around. So for me, I tend to wake up at 5 o'clock every morning, and I have 2 hours, my golden hours, when I can do my writing. And that then allows me, usually, as I say, I'm a quick writer, so 2 hours for me, 2,000 words very, very quickly, which means 10,000 words a week. Within about 9-10 weeks, I usually have a workable first draft of the book.
Wow.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. I get that reaction a lot from other writers. They kind of shoot me evil looks when I kind of say that.
Well, no, I'm sitting here awestruck now.
So in fairness, I've recently discovered that I'm autistic and I have a very visual kind of mind, and I will plot my books to the nth degree before I start writing. And so when I then come to do the writing on the day, I'll skim some bullet points that I've written down, and then like the scene just plays out in my head like it's on a big cinema screen, and all I've got to do is describe what's going to happen. So yeah, it's very lucky.
Right. Do you stick rigidly to the to your plan, or do you find you introduce things you hadn't expected?
So I try to stick to it, but yeah, every now and again a character will do something totally unplanned for that then takes it off in another direction. I end up having to replot some of the later chapters. But yeah, I try and stick to it as much as possible.
Have you always been a big crime fan?
Huge crime fan. I mean, I've always been a fan of reading. I used to spend every weekend in the library as a child, and then I got into crime fiction massively in my 20s, and it's all I read. I write the kind of books that I would want to read myself.
Yeah, me too. So have you got any particular favourites at the moment?
Particular favourites? That's so difficult. So I've just come from moderating a panel where I've had to read kind of the other 4 authors' books, and I can recommend them all highly. So we had The Other Woman by Tanya Tay, Her Last Lie by J.S. Lark, The Other Woman by Isabel Sherlaw, and Am I Guilty by Jackie Kabler. So I'd recommend all 4.
You heard it here first, folks. So M.A. Hunter, thank you very much for speaking to us today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Richard.
Right, with me now is Cathy Ace, who has lots of books out at the moment. Tell us about them, Cathy.
Hello, it's lovely to meet you. Thank you for having me along today.
Not at all.
Yes, I do. I chat a lot and I write a lot. So I write two different series. The Kate Morgan Mysteries, the 13th book came out last year, and it follows the pattern of the titles, The Corpse with the, and in that instance it was Opal Fingers. And that book was set in Australia. Each book is set in a different country. The next book in that series, number 14, will be coming out in September of this year, and that's going to be, drumroll, The Corpse with the Pearly Smile. And it's set in exotic Tahiti. So I'm really looking forward to that one coming out and people getting excited about Tahiti, which is a magnificent place and everyone should go, but not all at once. And the other series that I write is always set in Wales. And that's the Wise Inquiries Agency Mysteries series. Now that features 4 female professional private investigators. And again, the titles have a theme. The most recent that came out was number 9 in that series, The Case of the Bereaved Butler, which came out earlier this year. And the 10th is coming out quite quickly, actually, in June. And that's The Case of the Secretive Secretary. So you can see there's a little bit of alliteration in those titles because those are the cozier books.
Yes.
So they're set in Wales, there's a Welsh village, there's a stately home, you meet the Duke, the Duchess, the Dowager, who's maybe a bit dotty, or maybe very sharp, and she likes to help the private investigators. Although, is she help or is she a hindrance? Can't be sure on that one. But those are quite a different type of book, because there's always 3 or 4 cases running throughout the book. They each get tied up within the book.
Right.
So it's not like a series of novella. All the stories intermingle through the personnel within the agency, whereas the Kate Morgan Mysteries, it's really much more about Kate tripping over a corpse, really by the end of the second page of the book, and then being on a hunt for justice throughout the rest of the book.
So it's almost like a kind of mix between short story and novel.
Yes, I mean, the Wise Inquiries Agency, because there are 4 investigators, it seems that I'm asking my readers to suspend disbelief just a little too much if all 4 of the agents are working on one case at the same time, because they never earn a living that way. So they have some very small cases. It might be, the case of the gnome that's gone, or it might be the case of the purloined pickles, which is a true village mystery, or they might be dealing with something that is more serious and might draw in elements of society that are somewhat darker, but still treated with a light touch.
Yeah.
And those other detectives within the team are dealing with that particular case. They'll always tend to have some paying cases and then some pro bono cases, because they're part of a community and they can't ignore the problems within the community. And of course, when everybody knows you're a private detective, they
Yes.
want you to do something for them for free, like when everybody knows you're an author. Oh, I'd love to read your book, and they hope you're going to hand them one. It's that sort of thing, yes.
So do you draw a lot of your characters from real life?
I do. Kate Morgan is a short, somewhat bossy, somewhat well-covered Welsh Canadian who might not be a million miles away from the woman you're now sitting opposite. And she's written in the first person. Those books are told in the first person. So it's very much my voice. She's not me, but she is very much based on me. She says some of the things I would only ever dare think, because she doesn't have a very effective edit button, I'm pleased to say. And her partner in life and in crime is the much more practical person who tethers her. When she's like a dog with her nose on the ground, ferreting out a path towards justice, he'll be the one who says, well, that's not practical, and we need to take care here. And people have asked, is he based on my husband? He's not, but he's an amalgamation of figures that I know within my life who have that aspect of a personality. Now, the wise women, they are much more based upon real people I do know in real life. But the funny thing is, they don't recognise themselves.
No, isn't that funny? I've found that. 2 or 3 times I've based a character on somebody, in the family or somebody that everybody knows, and they never spot themselves.
They don't, do they? They say, there's one particular character, Annie, who's quite clumsy, and she's an amalgamation of two people I really know. And the one who I really know who is clumsy is always laughing at how clumsy the character is, not recognising that she is, bless her heart. You can rely upon this, you know, she can trip over a carpet just by looking at it, you know?
Yeah, well, I sympathise. I can trip over a flat piece of paper sitting on a flat floor, you know.
Yeah.
But it's interesting what you say about sidekicks, because they're very important in a lot of crime fiction, aren't they?
They really are. And you know, it's interesting you say that, because with Kate, she is definitely the main character. And Bud, while I wouldn't call him a sidekick, he's a partner. And without him, she probably wouldn't get to where she needs to go. But he is her helpmate, so very much a supporter. And I'd written 8 of those books before the Wise Inquiries Agency Mysteries took off as novels. I'd already written 2 novellas and then into the novels. But when I put those together, I really wanted a team of people. And with 4 people, they each have their strengths and weaknesses. But I wanted them to all synergistically achieve much more together than they ever could apart. And whilst that's true of a partnership, I think I've had to work harder or differently to make that work across 4 people who have differences and can rub each other the wrong way. And of course, because they are firm friends, will often say things to the friend or partner that can sound caustic until the reader learns that within the relationship that criticism or disagreement can work. And they always end up pulling together and being, yes, helpmates, but they're more even-handedly there. So there aren't leaders and followers. Although in each book I think I do have to give the spotlight to 1 or 2 of those characters, because it would be too much to focus on all at once otherwise.
They must be very difficult to plot.
Oh my goodness me. Thank you for recognising that. Yes. The Wise Inquiries Agency Mysteries have led me through. I am a plotter. That's the first thing to admit or claim. I don't know which is the better word to use. I now use post-it notes for those because the timeline plotting is critical. Yes, of course, you can't have a person in 2 places at once. But because they are supporting each other, I need to make sure that their investigation is at a point where they are able to offer the support that's required of them. So I can't have all of their stories reaching a climax at exactly the same time, unless, of course, that's something I want to happen so that the help they might rely upon otherwise isn't available to them. And maybe they have to turn to another source for help or find something within their own personality they didn't even know existed. So sometimes when the help's not there, you yourself have to grow as a person, and then you come through that recognizing something about yourself you never did before. So yes, they are complicated to plot, and that I think is why I'm a plotter. Even the Kate Morgan mysteries, because they're traditional Golden Age shaped mysteries, the characters, she's a psychologist, so she's always looking at the psychological profile of the people she's investigating. And I find I need to know those characters extremely well before I even start to write the book. Because everything that they possibly could have done it, or no, they never would have done it, has to come from within them. So plotting that through the book is critical for my process, so that when I get to where I need to take them, the reader's there with me. It's not something coming out of the blue that they're not expecting about that character, unless, of course, I want it to be. You know, it is a deep, dark secret they've kept really well hidden, and that can flummox or twist. But yes, plotting to me is critical. I can't start to write until I've got the whole movie in my head from beginning to end. Then I'll do an outline, and then I will break everything down into chapters so that I know who is where, doing what, and why. And I also take notes about what I want the reader to know by the end of that chapter and what I want them to feel by the end of that chapter. Because my ultimate goal is for a reader to experience my books rather than necessarily feel that they've read them. I want them to lose themselves in the story rather than read the words that are the storytelling.
Do you find you have to as you're weaving the various threads together, do you find you need to remind your readers of where this little bit of plot is and that little bit of plot is? Or do you just let your readers sort of soak it in as we go along?
Well, I'll answer this honestly. My mum has helped me a lot with this. Not because she's told me anything, but because I understand the way she reads.
Right.
And she does need a bit of a reminder now and again of something that she read a day or two ago.
Yeah.
And I think with people who don't plough through a book, you need to just drop in a little reminder. But you can edit that down so it's a touch of a reminder, a brush stroke, rather than a retelling of the whole plot point.
Yes.
Because there are people who will read a book quickly, and for them then it becomes mindless and quite irritating repetition.
Yeah.
But I do think that reminders are important.
I do,
And
yes.
I think if you have characters who are being introduced later in the book and they need to be brought up to speed, you can do that with a light touch, hopefully. That's what I aim for. There might be people listening to this who've read my books and thought, not so sure about that. I hope not, because what I try to do is to just give a little tip of a reminder as to why we are now doing this thing.
Right. I mean, the master of that was P.G. Wodehouse, because every couple of pages you get a little reminder of who somebody is or what's just happened and that sort of thing. And I find I'm very conscious of that. I always feel I have to put in just a couple of words, even, just to remind people who this person is. Such as that. Because I always think if somebody comes up to you and says, "Oh, I read your book, I read it in an hour," sort of thing. And I think, that took months. And you read it in an hour.
I know. And you know what? As your soul is dying, just take it as a compliment.
Yeah,
Because
I do.
it means they
were
loved it
absorbed
enough.
in it, yes.
First of all, they finished it.
Yes.
And that's wonderful, because people do find books that are not their cup of tea, and I totally understand this isn't for me, I'm setting it aside. I get that. Life's too short. However, they've got to the end.
Yeah.
They remember it was written by you,
Yeah.
and they're actually taking the time to tell you, which is the greatest blessing we can get.
Oh, yes.
But also, yes, I do get my blood is on the keyboard still from that book. But I'm delighted that you enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Is bubbling out of my mouth as inside there's a little bit of me that's going, oh, oh,
Yeah.
oh. Yeah, that's okay. We can win
I
through
feel
in
your
silence.
pain.
Yes, yes.
Well, Cathy Ace, thank you so much for talking to us today. It's been lovely to meet you. And the best of luck with the forthcoming titles.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And lovely. You've got a lovely laugh. I enjoy that. It's
Thank
great
you so
when
much.
people laugh.
Now I have with me A Abbott.
Hello, it's a pleasure to talk about my books. I've written 2 domestic thrillers set in Clifton in Bristol, and I'm working on my 3rd. Prior to that, I wrote a psychological thriller set in Bristol, Bath and Birmingham. And before that, a series of crime thrillers which were set in London, Birmingham, and a fictional former Soviet Union state called Kazakhstan, run by a corrupt dictator. So obviously that's nothing like real life at all.
Would you say that you give us an accurate picture of Clifton, or is it a fictionalised Clifton?
It's a fictionalised Clifton, but I would say that it is in many ways quite true to life. The reason that I started setting books in Clifton was simply because as a result of the pandemic, I tended to travel less. And I live in Clifton, so that made research very, very easy to do. For example, in one of my books, Lies at Her Door, there's a dramatic scene on the zigzag path, which, as you might imagine, zigs and zags down the Avon Gorge from Clifton to Hotwells.
Yeah.
And I stood on the suspension bridge. I tied a brightly coloured plastic bag to some broken railings on the zigzag path, but I stood on the suspension bridge just to make sure that I could see it from that vantage point.
Right, that's research. I understand at the moment you're self-published.
I belong to the Bristol Fiction Writers Group,
Right.
And several members of the group had self-published before I started doing so.
Mm-hmm.
And I was attracted to it by the fact that you don't have to go through any gatekeepers, you don't have to wait years to publish. As an impatient person, it was really appealing that I could get a book out there straight away. Obviously, there are things that I like to do with a book first before I publish it. I have something like 30 beta readers who will read a draft and give me feedback on it.
Yeah.
And they're a mixture of writers, people who like to read, and people who have specialists in a particular thing. So, for example, a couple of former police detectives who are occasionally pulled in to read about police procedure.
Yeah. The thing with self-publishing is you've got to be a very good self-publicist, haven't you? You've got to. I noticed you're wearing a T-shirt today with your with your book cover on.
My latest book, Flat White Flies.
Good marketing strategy. But do you enjoy that side of it? You know, the publicity, the getting out there for sales and so forth.
I like getting out there. I like meeting people.
Is that something that you think you'll continue doing? Because I know some people, I mean, me included, some people sort of try it and think it's not really for me because of that, all that publicity and all the extra work that's involved in that. And other people take to it like a duck to water. So do you think that's going to be your preferred publishing method from now on?
I think so. I've got 10 books out there and I'm working on the 11th. So I think it's a tried and tested road for me by now.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us, give us an idea of the plots of your Flat White Lies. What's it all about?
Wow, there's a clue in the name, Richard, because Flat White Lies is set in a coffee bar in Clifton Village, and as I live very close to Clifton Village, I have patronised most of its coffee bars. At one point, I worked out there were 12 places that you could go to for a cup of coffee, and I think they've only increased since then. The main character is Jenna, who's a young woman who's effectively an orphan. Her mother's dead, she's fallen out with her stepfather. She's ended up working in insurance in Bristol, and finally she's saved enough money to open her dream, a coffee shop selling lush homemade cupcakes. Something that she dreamed about with her mother, and it was something that they would have done together had her mother lived. So she's really emotionally invested in her coffee shop, chucks in the job. Her boyfriend is really rich, apparently, and helps her financially. And then it all turns sour because he's ripped her off. She's desperate for money. The coffee shop's just not hitting the spot with the public, and she ends up making some really bad decisions. Specifically, there's quite a handsome customer who she fancies, a sort of silver fox type guy. And he suggests to her that as he's buying a house locally and needs somewhere to rent in the short term for himself and his daughter, that they could move into the spare rooms in her flat, a flat which she's scared of losing because of her debts. And he'll pay her rent and it will solve all her problems and it will solve his problems too. Win-win. Except that the man isn't what he seems and his daughter is not his daughter.
Uh-oh. Well, A Abbott, thank you very much for talking to us today, and have a good crime fest.
Thanks very much, Richard. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. One of the best-known names in British crime fiction is Maxim Jakubowski, and he's with me now. And I think it's fair to say that you're probably king of the crime fiction anthology. What do you think makes a good anthology?
Basically, I spent most of my working life as an editor in book publishing, and in parallel I was writing, of course, but I was obviously a publisher by trade, and when I left publishing some years ago now, I sort of burnt out. Basically, doing anthologies. I'd done a few before, but only a handful. But keep on. I still had ideas for books. So I started doing anthologies, and obviously I had the contacts, I had the authors, I had the ideas.
Yeah.
So in a way, it was a way of keeping abreast of editing, and then it grew and grew and grew to a rather suspicious effect, so to speak, insofar as I was in fact doing a count a few weeks ago because I sold my latest anthology, and publisher is a publisher I haven't worked with before, and asked me, so what anthology is it? And I think it was on number 125.
Good grief.
Looking for Hitchcock, coming out March of next year in England and America.
Right.
In all good bookshops.
Where do you think crime fiction is at the moment? I mean, in terms of the market?
I think crime fiction is in a very good place, but then on the other hand, when has it not been in a good place? Crime fiction, whether people are snobs about it or not, has always constituted a very large proportion of basically fiction readership. It goes a little bit up, a little bit down, other genres gain and then fall back. But crime fiction has just been very, very steady because I think its main virtue is A, it is entertainment, it can be social, but it's always readable, and therefore I love literary fiction, and I also write literary fiction myself, but the majority of readers we have to accept, and I say this as somebody who worked in publishing for 30 years, basically the majority of readers just want a good read. They want to read stories they want to engage with. In some cases they want to be entertained, in some cases they want to be challenged, and crime fiction, I mean from Edgar Allan Poe onwards, has always done that. So I think the future, we are going through a golden age right now, but when you look back at every decade has been a golden age, and I suspect that the decades that to follow will continue, because there are still so many good... You'd think that body is found, who did it?
Yes, you think you'd run out of ideas?
Sort of an amateur or policeman or whatever. Yeah. You'd think one would run out of variations, but it's a challenge to writers, and writers, old and new, keep on coming up with new angles and entertaining us, basically.
Because it's a very broad church.
Oh, absolutely.
You've got so many styles.
Absolutely. I mean, there are many what I would term rather pretentiously subgenres. Right now, what's big is the domestic thriller. Ever since Gillian Flynn's Gone Girl, then Girl on the Train, Girl in the Window, to the extent that now, obviously, publishers have stopped putting girls in the title. Yeah. And last year, I wrote a crime novel last year, and I thought, I know I'm 10 years behind the curve, but it's called Just a Girl with a Gun, which obviously, I mean, does describe the book, but was also a slight joke at the expense of all the girls who spent 2 years in the bestseller list 10 years before. I'm always either 10 years ahead of the curve as a writer or 10 years behind.
How do you think the whole genre has changed in the time that you've been involved in publishing?
I think it's just got more recognition. I mean, the readership is increasing steadily, but I think a lot of mainstream literary, I won't say establishment, because obviously, let's say establishment with a small e, is no longer as snobbish as they used to be. And of course, a lot of writers who are beginning in what I would term the literary mainstream are moving into crime, or like John Banville, switching. One book is a literary book, one book is a crime book, and the borders between crime and mainstream literature are getting more and more fuzzy.
Yeah, I mean there is a lot of blurring, isn't there, these days?
Well, which is one of the reasons I love crime fiction, because I've always been, both when I was active as a publisher, but also as a reader and a fan. And I've always loved popular fiction. I started very young writing science fiction and fantasy. And the first 15 years of my writing career, that's all I wrote. Then I started editing crime and publishing a lot of crime writers, and I thought, oh, I want to have a go, although what I wrote was very different and didn't really fit in, but that's just what I like to write. And then some of my publishers on my science fiction and fantasy and then on my crime were sort of giving discreet calls to my agent saying, could he cut down on the sex? There's too much sex in his books. So I was totally contrary. I then took out all the science fiction and fantasy. I took out all the investigations and the crimes, and I wrote a book which was purely erotic. And I sold it to Hollywood for $1 million. It's never been filmed, but I've kept the money. I love blending genres, and that's what I've been doing more and more over the last few years, which means I'm utterly uncommercial. I mean, the books sell, but my old pen name still outsells them by 100 to 1.
Yeah. How do you think the big publishers these days are holding their own against the smaller independents?
Well, the smaller independents have carved a niche for themselves, but the cake is large enough to accommodate most. I mean, when I was, until a year ago, for 2 years, I was chair of the Crime Writers Association, and it was basically Bucket's turn, and nobody else volunteered. And I did my 2 years, which not every chair has survived in the past. Many gave up after 1 year. And my friend Maxim Khan has taken over as chair and has just completed his first year. And he's going to complete his second year, but we're already casting desperately, because I'm still on the board, we're already casting desperately for who will volunteer or be volunteered to become the next chair. Because it's a poison chalice. But during the 2 years, the one thing I'm rather proud of is during the 2 years I was chair, the membership of the association increased by 50%. And also, after a long debate and a vote with the existing members, we started accepting self-published authors, because there are some self-published authors who now, this comes back to your initial question, are now selling more than a lot of traditionally published. Not all of them. They're not a majority, but a lot of them are selling actually surprising quantities. And during my years as an editor in publishing, I always worked for big publishers. I worked in France for the biggest publisher in France, where I was a prime editor. Then I came back to England and I started Virgin Books for Richard Branson, and then moved to Penguin. And finished, I was running Ebury Press before they were bought by Random House. Then I left publishing after Ebury, and because I wanted to write more. And then I got bored and I opened the bookshop. But I was still writing all the time. And but it'll be announced this autumn. I'm coming back to publishing. I'm 3 of the directors of the Ashed book group, including the whole team who ran Hodder Headline for Ashed, left Ashed a year and a half ago. They set up a new company called Bedford Square Press, and a lot of their authors have followed them. Sophie Hanna, Sarah Poretsky have followed them, and I've just been appointed editor at large. So I'll be doing my own books, very few of which will be crime, oddly enough, because Bedford Square have acquired No Exit Press.
Oh, yes.
So No Exit Press continues, so they don't really need. I mean, I might occasionally put a book in No Exit Press, but most of my interests, I'm doing books that I feel should be published, and so it is a new independent, but it's a new independent with obviously a lot of clout, because obviously the 3 owners, and I also now have equity in the company. So it's a small independent who will become big fairly quickly. I mean,
well, I was going to ask you what you're working on next, but
I have a book. Actually, that's the thing about book writing now. You have to promote. In the olden days, you let the publishers do the promoting. I have a new book coming out in November, which is my shortest book ever. It's a novella, actually, but which I thought would be difficult to sell, but it'll be coming out with a small publisher, which is called the Exopotamia Manuscript. It's a sort of magical realist fantasy. It's not really a thriller, although there are thrills involved. It's basically a perverse love story, which starts with a writer who's run out of inspiration, nudge nudge, coming off a boat in St John's Harbour in Newfoundland because the boat is stuck in port because of a hurricane in the high seas. And I was on that boat, caught in the hurricane, and has 3 days to kill in St John's Harbour, Newfoundland. He walks into the diner, orders a clam chowder, and 5 hours later leaves the diner with the waitress. At the end of the story, basically, it turns out she is in fact the angel of death, and there's a rather unusual demise of the main character as he's transformed into a tree in ways I will not describe without giving a spoiler away. Although my previous book, The Piper's Dance, had castrating mermaids at the end. So,
well, Maxim Jakubowski, thank you so much for sparing the time to talk to us today. Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
That was Bookmarks with Richard Gadz. For more, visit www.richardgadz.co.uk.